Broadcasting from the Allen B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation at Nova Southeastern University. Welcome to Sunshine Startups Live, featuring rockstar entrepreneurs, bright ideas, and experts on the startup ecosystem. And now your hosts of Sunshine Startups Live, Jim Ryan and John Wensveen.
Hi, and welcome to Sunshine Startups Live. I'm entrepreneur, investor, and startup enthusiast Jim Ryan. Got a great episode with you today. On deck, a super entrepreneur who's making waves here in the state of Florida, and I'm joined by my good friend and colleague here at the Levan Center on Sunshine Startups Live, John Wensveen. John, great to be with you again, my friend.
You're so good at that opening. It's almost
like as good as your opening.
Oh, well, welcome to the world's first theme park for entrepreneurs, the Allen B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation. We are a 53,000 square foot theme park for entrepreneurs, truly colliding entrepreneurs with academia, industry, government, funders, wraparound service, professional service providers, and a whole lot more with local, regional, national, and international impact. I'm very excited about today's guest.
We have a terrific guest with us today. You've probably seen in the news, a multi-country a person of origin, a global entrepreneur, Anya Freeman, who's CEO, founder of Kind Designs, who's made a splash. I'm using a lot of,
yeah.
You like that?
Yeah.
And we're gonna
words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about seawalls. Her business has launched here in Florida at great success. Going to talk about her background as a startup and where her company is going and helping support uniquely here a lot of the problems that we are facing in South Florida. So Anya, first of all, welcome to the podcast. And secondly, congratulations on all the success thus far.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Very different times than last time we spoke. It was just a seed of an idea.
That's right.
So I'm excited to come back and fill you in on what's been happening.
Last time you and I spoke, we were working on the pitch deck a little bit, and then saw you at Emerge, and you did amazing at the Emerge conference this past year, and you're off to the races. So let's talk about your background first, because it is, I mentioned global, and you are truly global. And so talk about where you kind of grew up, where you've lived briefly, and then what brought you to Florida and what have you seen?
Sure. So I was born in Ukraine, in Kharkiv. My family is half Russian, half Ukrainian. And we moved to Israel, like many Jewish people. When the communism collapsed in 1991, they were able to leave the former Soviet Union. And Israel had these great programs for Jewish Russians, Ukrainians. And so we moved to Israel. I grew up in Beersheba, but the dream was always America. And we got the opportunity to come here when my dad got a job at the space program. So I'm a very typical Soviet family. My dad is a rocket scientist, and my mom is a gymnastics teacher. And so the three of us and my brother all got the chance to come over to the U.S. when I was a teenager. So we moved to Kennebunkport, Maine, if you have been, a very cute small town in New England. And I showed up literally not speaking one word of English. I did not know what we're supposed to wear on the first day of school, but feeling so pumped about becoming American. My whole family is very, very, just patriotic. They just are very happy to be in this country. And so with that spirit, I eventually went to law school to fulfill their American dream. My brother started on the right path. He went to medical school, but he also dropped out and has a startup. But I went the law school route, like a good immigrant child. And that's how I came to Miami, because I got a scholarship to study at UM Law. And so and it wasn't even my first choice at the time. I kind of applied everywhere. I've never really been here. But from the moment I arrived, I just fell in love with the city and with South Florida, because unlike Maine, which is so lovely, and I'm so grateful I got, to start my American life there. But here in South Florida, everyone's like me. There's so many languages and cultures, and there's just this juiciness to life. And I just felt so at home. And so I did graduate. I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I opened my own law firm. And I was living in South Beach with my girlfriends in my 20s, really enjoying life, as you can imagine. And then I started to notice something that would change the course of my career, which is that my city, which I love so much, was literally sinking. And I know theoretically there's a lot of conversation around rising sea levels, but when you live in a house in South Beach, like you really feel it. And I've been here now for 13 years, and there's a very big difference from when I arrived to now in frequency of flooding and the amount of flooding. And so I just became very curious about the space.
And you were sharing with me, I recall, that you actually experienced the flooding yourself, and kind of talk about that as part of, sort of that particular moment in time, and then how does it sort of metastasize from there?
Exactly. There would be some days it would be a storm surge or it would rain for a while, and our driveway was literally like we were knee deep in water trying to get to our cars. One of my friend's cars got flooded. And I don't think you even get flood insurance for cars anymore in South Florida because it's just like normal part of life. The car might just float away one day. And so I was just very shocking to me to notice the difference because that was not happening 13 years ago. And now like once a month at least, we were having these major floods in my house. And that's when I started looking into this space. And what I saw right away is there was a lot of attention on this problem. A lot of articles have come out, like the Rolling Stones had a cover article, and it was called Goodbye Miami. And that really seemed to be the narrative. And all this media was covering the story, but the narrative was basically doom and gloom. Enjoy Miami and all our beautiful coastal cities while you can, because we'll all be underwater soon. Like the deadline for Miami is 2060. It's when you'll have almost daily flooding, and 2100, Miami will be completely underwater. And so I was, I was able to find a lot of resources on the problem, but I was so surprised to see that nobody was really focused on the solution. They were kind of busy selling books, on this dramatic story, but there was very little conversation around how do we apply technology or convergence of technologies and all this new talent, all these new people that are moving to Florida. How do we all get together and come up with solutions for this challenge rather than just enjoying the city while we can?
So it's interesting. I often say that the number one way to kill innovation, lawyers. And here you are with a legal background, and you're being very, very innovative. And you just mentioned a cover story with Rolling Stone. I got a delivery yesterday. I don't know if you've even seen this.
No, what is
Florida
it?
Trend magazine, and you are profiled in it right here on page 46. So here's your copy if you don't have it, but you are famous.
Thank you
I always
so
said,
much.
I used to say that if you made it to Oprah, you did it. But if you make it in Florida to Florida Trend magazine, you've made it.
Sure.
I'm going to send it to my mom.
congratulations.
She's going to
Absolutely.
be very happy.
You must do
Thank
that.
you.
So let's talk a little bit about your company. So obviously there's a challenge that needs a strategic solution. You're in that world right now. You're making it happen. Tell us a little bit more about what your company does.
Sure. So we are a climate tech and construction tech startup. We're based in Miami, and we are addressing this challenge that we've been talking about of rising sea levels by 3D printing living seawalls. So I'm sure living in Florida, you're all very familiar with seawalls. Our living seawalls are identical to traditional seawalls in many ways and by design. They're exactly the same strength. They're exactly the same dimensions. And that you can install them in exactly the same way with the same equipment. But we are 3D printing our seawalls. And because we're 3D printing, the living seawalls are also radically different from traditional seawalls in two ways. One is that we can make them exponentially faster. We are already, as we're speaking, my team is 3D printing 10-foot seawall panels in 1 hour. Wow. We can print 8 panels in a shift. Traditionally, the only alternative to our seawall panels, construction companies made their own seawall panels using molds, and that process takes 24 hours and then 2 to 3 more weeks for the molds to cure before they can be moved and installed. So with 3D printing, we're printing our panels in an hour compared to 24 hours. Mm-hmm. The second difference is that we have freedom of design. So with my robot, I can print these flat concrete panels, sure, but there's very little added time or cost for me to incorporate design elements that make my seawall function like a marine habitat, essentially an artificial reef. So we use biomimicry design principles. The first generation seawalls, they all mimic mangrove roots, which are mangroves are a natural marine habitat. And so the face of the seawall mimics the roots and creates very deep caves, like 3-foot caves, where sea life can hide from predators. So those caves encourage sea life to attach. And then they deposit their skeletons into the wall over time. So the wall actually begins sequestering carbon just naturally through biocalcification. And the living seawalls have built-in sensors that collect data. So they're still structurally identical, but now they're collecting data, they're sequestering carbon, they're functioning like a reef, and they're exactly the same price as a toxic traditional seawall. There's no green premium whatsoever, which is why we've been able to grow and scale so quickly.
Just an add-on question to that. So I'm curious, are there any regulatory barriers that you have to face with your company? I'm assuming that from whether it be a city, a county, a state, federal government, and beyond, what are the hurdles that you have to deal with?
Well, that's the reason we designed our first generation living seawalls to be identical to traditional seawalls. So we meet the current regulations. So it's the same reinforcement, which is rebar every 6 inches. So we meet the code. Fundamentally, it's the same material, which is concrete, but ours is non-toxic. But it's the same PSI, the same strength of concrete that also meets code, and it's installed in the same way. So we just want to create a product that you can just plug in today. That's why we're already in the water. And next, we can start pushing the envelope and really lobbying for some major innovation in coastal construction. One example is that right now, building codes, they mandate that seawalls are reinforced with rebar. Well, rebar is what makes seawalls fail. Concrete can last hundreds of years, but when you put steel rebar inside and you put it underwater, it rusts. So after 40 years, typically, the seawall literally pops because the rebar expanded and popped the concrete. We already have a way to reinforce our seawalls with no rebar, instead using recycled marine plastic fibers. And the seawalls with these fibers, instead of lasting 40 years, can last 400 years. So we'll be submitting, we already are doing all the testing, we'll be submitting all of those results so that the next generation seawall, living seawalls, we can create without the rebar. But we didn't want to start there because we want to get in the water immediately because it's such an urgent issue, the rising sea levels in our city.
She did bring a 10-foot seawall with her to show us the product, but we
On her
couldn't fit it
shoulder.
into the studio.
Yeah, I rode the robot here from Miami on 95.
So I'm amazed by you because you obviously have an incredible background, multilingual, multi-traveled, passed the bar, legal background, learned the language here. And I'm really looking for what was the aha moment, though? So I want to wind it back just a little bit, and then we could go further. So you've experienced this, flooding. You talked to a few friends, and all of a sudden you went from a legal mind to let me investigate this problem. And then, but what was the aha moment that you said, I think that there's a potential business here from legacy product to something that I could design, build. Again, it's not that you had a background in this, right? I mean, you didn't have a construction, marine, government necessarily background. You had a legal background. But so what was that sort of aha moment for you that said, gee, I think I've got something here?
I always knew that this was a problem, but the aha moment was when I realized that this can be a multi-billion-dollar business. And that happened when I just, kind of like this, someone just passed me a report from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So they oversee all the seawalls in the United States. And they create a report showing how much they're planning to spend on seawalls in the next 20, 40, 100 years. And they broke it down by state. And that report said that in the United States as a whole, at bare minimum in their own language, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is budgeting $400 billion to be spent on seawalls by 2040. And they broke it down by state. And by far, the number one state as far as seawall spend is Florida. We will spend $76 billion by 2040 on seawalls. And then they broke it down by cities. And out of the top 10 cities in the United States, which will be hardest impacted by rising sea levels and which will then spend the most on seawalls, 5 cities are in Florida. And by far, the number one city is Miami. So we just happen to live in the biggest seawall market in the United States and the world. And Miami is number one. Number two was New York City, and it was only half the size. So it's just an incredible place to innovate this because there's such an enormous economic opportunity.
Makes sense.
So I'm really interested about the future, and you gave some stats and the future and what it looks like, and essentially if everything's sinking, can one company solve all these problems, or what's it going to take so that South Florida is able to survive and stay afloat? There's a lot of speculation about what the future looks like. Some's positive, some of it's a little bit dim, but I'm really curious about what your perspective is, and are we going to be able to fix this problem?
Sure. For me, like the dim stories are just boring. I think it's easy for all of us, to talk for hours about how bad climate change is. We're all going to be underwater, but it's just boring, right? What I want to talk about is how can we solve it. So when it comes to climate technology, there is climate adaptation, and climate mitigation. So what we're doing is adaptation. We're adapting to the current conditions today. And basically, we're buying time for the guys who are focused on climate mitigation, like Elon Musk, who's giving all his money away to sequester carbon, for example. That's an example of mitigation. So as far as adaptation, seawalls are a huge part of the puzzle, the biggest part, I believe. There are other climate tech companies that are doing things with wave retention. Oh my gosh, I forget what they're called. The devices which slow down the waves and their impact on the coast. Of course, that's really important. Raising streets is also helpful. And those are all other
That seems
examples.
kind of daunting.
Yeah, but we're doing it. It's happening.
Yeah.
And it's all about we can accelerate the technology and the innovation in the space by really merging different technologies. So we love talking to other people in the space and seeing how can we combine our efforts. Because sometimes if you're just in one lane, and that's actually how this company was built so quickly, because it's a convergence of 3D printing, material science, and sensor tech. Right. And sometimes if you're in one lane, you don't realize what someone else is doing in another lane of technology, which could be applied to your business to really help you accelerate that. So I think by accelerating different technologies, we can definitely solve this problem in Miami and really make it an example for the rest of the world of how you can face this challenge and create something really beautiful and affordable for communities to tackle it.
So, obviously, post-emerge, congratulations again. You got media attention and so forth. We had Rob Panapinto here as one of our guests on the podcast, talking about you and the company and so forth. And so, but we didn't really explore you at that time and sort of the momentum that you've had. So, how did you get introduced to Govo Ventures? Congratulations on the round. Talk about that experience.
Sure. So I started fundraising maybe a year before I met Govo Ventures. And initially, well, first of all, I was a total outsider to tech. I mean, I was a lawyer. I did not have a big network. 100% of my outreach was just cold emails, which actually had a pretty high rate of responses too. So, because living seawalls, it sounds cool. People are curious.
That's something you hear about every day.
Exactly. But it's like, no, it's not like another app, which are great. But I think living seawalls just piques people's curiosity more. So initially, I was talking to the investors in Silicon Valley, in New York, which it was okay. But the biggest shift for me was when I realized that the difference in talking about this problem and the solution to investors in Florida. Because if you're in Florida, first, it's a huge problem. You yourself are getting flooded, or your friends that are getting flooded. You see the insurance skyrocketing. And you also understand the economic opportunity if you've ever paid for a seawall or your HOA paid for one, or you see your city's budgets, right? So when I started talking to Florida investors, it really shifted my fundraising experience, and we're able to raise really, really quickly. And the event that really changed that was in Emerge, which you mentioned. Emerge, as I'm sure your listeners know, is a big technology event in Miami once a year. And really the heart of this event is a startup competition. So they bring in 100 startups from around the world. And we were one of those startups. I actually didn't realize it was a big deal because I kind of sign up for things and I forget and I get accepted, And they give everybody a table. And people came with amazing projectors and samples. I showed up with literally a bag of stickers which people liked, but like there was nothing displayed on my table. And then, next thing I knew, we were in the quarterfinals, the finals, and then we're on this big stage. I don't know how many people are in attendance, but it's a few thousand, I think.
Several thousand.
Yeah,
Sure.
I speak on that main stage every year, and yeah, it could be 1,000 to 3,000 people sitting in that audience, and 18,000 people at the peak going through that event over 2 days. So it's big, like Florida Trend.
Yeah, thank you. It was the peak of my life to be on the stage, and there was 5 finalists, and we had the very unfair disadvantage of being the hometown team, of course. And so we spoke, and we didn't end up winning, but by speaking, all of a sudden, the next morning, literally, I woke up to hundreds of LinkedIn messages and emails from Florida investors who happened to be in the audience. So we've closed the round within like 2 months of that event. And the majority of investors were either there or they came through connections from investors who were there.
What year was that for eMerge?
It was in this month, this year, in
This
May.
year. Yeah, so this is a great case study, and this is one of the reasons that eMerge is amazing. And Melissa is a very good friend of ours, and we've actually had her in that seat with that microphone. And so you're a really great case study of success, especially coming from the outside in. If you look at the ecosystem, the landscape that we're operating in right now for entrepreneurs specific to South Florida, do you see any challenges and do you see opportunities? And what we're trying to do is help navigate, particularly the early stage startups, how to get through the system so that they can be successful. And you're a great person to talk to about what that looks like. But what is the ecosystem from your perspective?
I think it's about matching Florida investors with Florida startups. That has been such a game changer for us. I'm so grateful for, and it seems to be like a lot of new investors are coming to Florida and at least investing in this space. And so I think it's about creating I didn't even know these investors existed, because I just Googled top 10 climate investors. I knew nothing. So like a year ago,
Did
I
his
knew
name come
nothing. Not yet. So that was not very fruitful. So if I had more awareness about these amazing investors who are focused on our state, that could have expedited our fundraising.
Again, you have great humility talking about, because you, in some of the people that we've had in venture capital before, and John talks and sometimes asks, the jockey or the horse, is it the entrepreneur or is it the business? And quite often the answer is both and so forth. But here's something that you had on paper. It's not like you came in, and you certainly didn't come into eMerge, as you mentioned, with a seawall. You had stickers. And but here's something that you had, and knowing you for a while now, that you can clearly tell there's the energy, the intelligence, the enthusiasm. You've got the know-how, the knowledge base, the research that you've done. So you were able to talk about the problem. It's something else to actually then say, I can do it. And so how hard was it to go from conceptual in a presentation to being able to then go to the next step to the investor to say, I'm your gal? How did you do that and convince?
Yeah, I got really scrappy. I think it's my immigrant side. I can be very scrappy. And because I was stuck in this situation where I needed a physical space in Florida to bring my robot here and print a seawall to raise money. Right? But to do that, I needed money. So I was stuck between, I had, either I have no money for a physical space, and I can't get a physical space because I have no money. And the way I solved that is by actually asking our biggest customer. It's called Dock and Marine Construction. They've been doing seawalls for 100 years in Miami Beach. I asked them if they wanted to invest in the round. So they had already given us an LOI, letter of intent, for $3 million in orders for panels. And I then asked, could they also, in addition to being a customer, also would they want to participate as an investor? And they agreed. And the way they participated was not by giving us cash, but actually giving us one of their warehouses. So every month, instead of paying the rent in cash, I paid an equity on the current valuation. So it's not a discounted valuation. And that's how we're able to get a warehouse, get the robots here, print a seawall. And as soon as I was able to start taking my Zoom calls with investors, literally from my warehouse, and the robots behind me printing a wall. I mean, it was night and day.
And obviously that leveraging that experience and information, and you were being physically there, that obviously it was part of the special sauce, if you will, to go to the next round. So
I'm looking around the room. I got robots, and I thought Pepper was kind of cool, and other ones that down the hall here. But your robot seems a lot more interesting than mine, and probably a lot more expensive. But my question is going to go around a challenge. So when you talk to businesses, not just here in South Florida, but all over the world, and it's also a huge challenge for early stage startups, it's talent. So there's talent, and then there's qualified skill talent. And I'm curious, has access to talent and then retaining the talent been a challenge for you?
I love talking about this. And I don't know if it's too. The way I may answer may be a little controversial, but it's true.
We love
to
controversy.
Me. Okay. So, the majority of my team, we're now a team of 10 as of this week. We just hit the double digits.
Congrats.
Thanks. The majority of my team are robot operators, right? So, concrete robot technicians. You can't really find someone on LinkedIn who has that on their resume, right? Schools don't have that program. There's only a few companies in the world who have hired people and trained people like that for 3D printing houses. In the U.S., there's basically one company in Austin that's printing houses. So you can't just go, put a ad on LinkedIn and get robot technicians with this experience. So at first, I thought it was a challenge, but that I realized is actually extremely liberating. Because I just got to hire people who are just kick ass. Like, they're just super strong. You have to be really strong to operate these robots and to be lifting 50 pounds of concrete every 30 seconds to load into the robot. So I found guys who are super strong, super passionate about this impact, and just want to get dirty and work hard. So I don't care if you didn't even finish high school or if you went to Harvard. I don't care, how old you are, what race you are. Like, it's totally like blind hiring. Well, I just want to find the most kick-ass team that's really strong and wants to go out there and work hard. And then when you come look in our warehouse now, everyone comments like, wow, it's like an incredibly diverse team. And it was totally unintentional. It's actually unintentional diversity because they're just really strong, awesome guys.
Did you have to import the talent, or did you find it locally?
No. So at first I posted on LinkedIn, and we paid money to post on Indeed. I don't know. Those people, they didn't have this hustle mentality. Mm-hmm. And then I posted on Craigslist, where you find a lot of construction labor, and these guys are the best.
That's
really
interesting. It's a lesson learned and a nugget that
I'm
was
wondering,
passed.
I mean, I'm having trouble securing talent. I wonder if I should be on Craigslist. Maybe that's my solution.
if you want muscle and brains, it's Craigslist.
Yes.
So Anya, obviously, congratulations on all the success. Talk about where the business is today. You got funding now, and you're off to the races. You mentioned about you're a group of 10 now. Where is the business moving forward today?
Sure. So things have moved very quickly, as you know. As of June, we had nothing. I had my first employee, and we opened the warehouse in June. And then July, the robots arrived. We hired the initial team of 5. We did the training. We printed our first seawall in August. And by September, we were fully operational. So in this October 3rd, we put our first seawall in the water. Nice.
Congratulations on that as well.
First 3D printed seawall in the water, which is exciting.
Wow.
And that one, a lot of local media, they want to cover it, but I wanted the first one just to do it quietly because you never know till you're actually like banging these panels, into the ground, how they're going to hold up. And they did amazing. My customer literally picked up the seawall panel on a crane and dropped it from 10 feet in the air onto rocks, and it didn't even crack. So we're super happy with that.
On purpose?
Yeah, on
Wow,
purpose. He's
that's
crazy.
amazing.
I
Yeah.
know. But it's his name on these projects, so you want to make sure it's like the real testing of these panels. So since then, we have started producing our first commercial orders. So we already finished producing 12 panels for a 120-foot seawall that's going to a beautiful location in Miami Beach on Pine Tree Drive. It's like across from like the Fontainebleau Hotel, which people know. So it's like a very iconic location. We're delivering that on Monday, and it's going to be installed as soon as next week or the following week. So that will be very public, and it's very beautiful. Like these seawalls, they look cool in our warehouse, but when you see them in the water, it's something else because it has very deep caves. So when the water goes into those caves, you really see the depth of the panels. It's special. And now we're already printing our second big commercial order of another 11 panels, 110-foot seawall. It's going to water in Miami. So we're just cranking them out. We're printing every day at this point. And in February, we're tripling our production capacity because we already purchased 2 more robots, which will be arriving that month.
So I had a property way down in the Keys at one point, no longer have it, but our seawall was falling into the sea, and we were responsible for the maintenance of that. And it's a very hefty price tag to repair a seawall. And there are all kinds of things that go around that in terms of red tape. And I'm curious, if I'm a private resident and and you talk about commercial, but if I'm a private resident and I have to put in a new seawall or make a repair, can I actually call you and you can come fix my problem?
So this has been a recent development. So initially, I just thought this business is
By the way, he sounds like a future customer
yes,
to me.
would you like to lick a seawall?
I'm going in this direction potentially.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
All the environmental benefits free for you.
Okay.
So initially, I thought this is just going to be B2B. So we just make panels, we sell them to local seawall construction companies, and they do the installation, the permitting. But instead of making their own panels like they always do, they can just outsource that to us. But what's happened just in the last few weeks because of all the media coverage is that so many homeowners are reaching out to us. And also governments are reaching out to us for seawall projects. So that's something we're trying to figure out now because I don't think I want to go in the construction business. There's so many variables in it, right? The weather, getting the big construction crews. Like I'm very happy being in a warehouse. We have this down to a science, the production flow, right? It's so efficient. We can just print the panel every hour, 24 hours a day, essentially. So for now, we're just giving that business to our customers. The seawall construction companies that we've been working with. But in the future, we need to figure out a way to at least monetize it because we are getting a lot of that business directly now.
Well, it's a good problem to have, obviously.
Exactly.
You know, that you could build up a potential queue of John-like folks that might be interested in from a residential standpoint. So with the success that you've had, are you looking for additional funding? Where are you situated right now in that? Are you going to go for additional tranches of capital? Are you thinking about, I think at this stage, are we going to continue to be able to bootstrap? Where are you from a funding standpoint today?
So we're past the bootstrap. We raised $5 million on an $18 million valuation. So we're a very comfortable amount of cash, which we're really using to scale. Because you see, there is so much demand for seawalls. The biggest challenge is to be able to scale to meet it, to scale production primarily. So the round, we were actually oversubscribed. We had $7 million. We narrowed down to $5 million. So at this point, the round is closed. We would consider taking on extra investment for very strategic investors. And that's the majority of our cap table already. So it's people in big construction companies, government people, and also some climate tech VC. But primarily the government and the construction investors are very strategic and because they give us so much more value than just the cash, which I appreciate. But they've also made huge introduction for us and are able to expedite the process with all the government and the building code departments.
So I'm very anxious to follow your career as it continues down the pathway that it is. If you look down the road 10 years from now, who are you? Where are you? What are you doing?
Sure. I'm the first.
By the way, this is the Rubik's Cube question time.
And she didn't stall.
She didn't flinch.
Not at all.
Oh, no. I mean, I think about it. Every day before I fall asleep, I imagine myself in 10 years. And first, me personally, first female unicorn in Miami. We've never had one. And especially female in construction is very rare. So, number one. Number two, we have scaled Kind Designs globally through a franchise model. The idea is to mass produce these panels here and really democratize this product so we can offer this solution to all coastal cities that are at risk from rising sea levels where seawalls are just cost prohibitive. So forget the environmental impact. It's just too expensive for them to even install seawalls, and they're abandoning those communities. So Kind Designs technology is global. And three, living seawalls in 10 years are mandated. They don't have to be Kind Designs living seawalls, but when we show that we can print these seawalls for the same budget for communities, and they function like reefs, and they sequester carbon, and they collect data, and they're beautiful, there's no reason to keep installing toxic traditional walls.
the 30-second advice. This is not necessarily my Rubik's Cube. John, that's John's take. But mine is 30-second advice, startups that are watching today. What would you share with them as, that's helped you in your success?
Sure, and this is borrowed from Tony Robbins, but one of his teachings is to just start. You don't have to have everything figured out before you get going. You just take a step forward and you adjust. You take another step and you adjust. And that's what we have done. We've just gone for it. And I think that's what surprises people, how quickly we've been able to go from June, just getting a warehouse and one employee, to today having seawalls in the water. And it was really through this kind of culture at Kind Designs of just going for it, and we'll figure out, adjust, and then take another step forward.
How do people get a hold of you, either through the company or to you?
Sure, it's just kinddesigns.com or livingseawalls.com, and you'll see my contact information there.
So excited for your success. It's amazing to see where you were to where you are, and certainly where you're going. So congratulations on everything. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. Your support really means a lot to us because it spreads the word, and that has helped us grow so much in the last few months. So I really appreciate it.
Anya Freeman, Kind Designs. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember to subscribe, like, and share the Sunshine Startups Live podcast and follow us on social media. If you're interested in sponsoring or appearing on the show, please email us at booking@sunshinestartups.live.